Outstanding. Brings us to the roll call. Mr. Quina.
Here.
Mrs. Dufort.
Here.
Mrs. Winstanley.
Here.
Mrs. Mulvena.
Here.
Mr. McKinnon.
Here.
And I'm here. All right. This time I will accept a motion for the approval of agenda items.
I move the Grand Ledge Public Schools Board of Education approve the February 26, 2018 agenda items as presented.
Second.
Jumping in, aren't I?
Motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? And passed. And then now I will accept a motion for the approval of consent agenda items. This time on the consent agenda items are meeting minutes from January 8th, the organizational and work session meetings, January 31st, the special meeting, February 12th, work session and closed session.
So I move the Grand Ledge Public Schools Board of Education approve the February 26, 2018 consent agenda items as presented.
Support.
Okay, motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Nay? Okay. That brings us to reports. Do we have a Capital Connections report today?
Well, we do. I'm not certain that it'll be presented in quite the same style that you did, Mr. Shiflett, but I'll do my best. So from February 16th, the information that I have that the state has come up with the income tax fix that will be fully phased in by 2021. And that was when the school aid fund will be reduced by more than $40 million a year in revenue. And that was something that Sarah had sent us some information about quite some time ago. So that was in fact voted in. House Bill 5526, continuing testimony for the letter grade system, still trying to determine if that's going to happen. They were also beginning testimony for House Bill 5524, which was mental health as part of professional development for teachers. The Senate Bill 574 was also signed by Governor Snyder on February 14th, requiring ISD enhancement millage to be distributed to the public school academies in addition to traditional districts. That goes into effect in mid-May. And currently looking at possibly a $233 per pupil increase for next year.
Well, you can tell it's busy down there with everyone term limits this year. There's just all kinds of stuff going on.
There is, and I think how the summer progresses and then how things go in November could determine how things progress for the rest of the year. In fact, I think this is going to be a very terrifying lame duck session this time. But that's future John's problem. And then the Eaton-Risa report. Jay Bennett, our representative on the Eaton-Risa board, submitted his report. February is CTE Awareness Month, and the Eaton-Risa Career Preparation Center's Facebook page has been highlighting students from around the RISA, including several Grand Ledge students. Visit their Facebook page to see the profiles. The Eaton-Risa board recently approved a continuation of their truancy prevention and intervention program in cooperation with the Eaton County Board of Commissioners and the 56th Circuit Court. The Eaton-Risa board found Superintendent Cynthia Anderson to be highly effective in her most recent evaluation, and the two parties also agreed to an amended 3-year contract from July 2018 through June 2021. Eaton-Risa board agreed to reauthorize the charter and renew the contract for a relevant academy of Eaton County. Our Creative Pulp program was a recent highlight in the Lansing Regional Chamber of Commerce February newsletter. This program allows students in our high school transition program to gain employability skills through the process of making paper that they later turn into greeting cards that are then sold locally, with the profits returning to the program. Students learn about process, time management, teamwork, and problem solving while seeing the finished results of their work. That concludes Mr. Bennett's report, and we thank him for that. Grand Ledge Education Foundation.
There is no report since that group has not met.
Okay. Grand Ledge Parks and Recreation.
Yes, at the Parks and Rec meeting, we had a presentation from the Rotary Club. They have offered to raise money and help with the J.C. Park renovation and building a pavilion, kind of a theater entertainment pavilion, which was part of the master plan. They have offered to take on that project, which was very, very nice. They do want naming rights to the park, so that is being discussed by the board as well as those that make that decision. But along with the splash pad, we're looking at moving towards having the entertainment pavilion with seating and everything in J.C. Park as well.
Awesome, I like that. All right, that concludes our reports at this time and moves us to public comment on non-agenda items. Mr. Secretary, if you would read the rules.
Yes. When addressing the board, please come to the podium, introduce yourself. You will be allowed up to 3 minutes. Out of respect for the board members, students, and staff, you will be interrupted if you personally attack a board member or district employee on issues unrelated to their job performance. Mention a student's name when discussing behavior or other incidents. Engage in discussion with other members of the audience. I will remind you when you are approaching your 3-minute limit. The board will not respond to questions or comments during public comment. However, the superintendent will do his best to answer questions at the end of the meeting. If immediate answers are not available, arrangements will be made to provide the information requested.
Hello, Greg Almy, 1205 Candela Lane. Welcome. I just wanted to share some information as the last time that we met 2 weeks. Oh, sorry. I do want to be given extra time as GLIA representative, please. When we met last time, we were discussing the extended calendar, what that might look like in Grand Ledge. I just wanted to share some side information. I was able to talk to a friend from college who actually taught in the Baldwin Public Schools, because our administration has been comparing and using Baldwin as kind of an example of what Grand Ledge could look like if we were to go to their proposed calendar. Just a side note, Baldwin is a small Class D school, one of the poorest counties in the state. My college friend taught there and was a senior teacher in Baldwin and left the district due to a balanced calendar. So the year they went to the balanced calendar, she did leave. Her children went to a school in another school district on a traditional calendar. She took a pay cut in order to make that move. Six other teachers also left Baldwin due to the balanced calendar. According to her, more had applied. 6 were able to leave Baldwin. Baldwin only has 42 total teachers, so that's about 14.3%. If you were to attribute that 14.3% as that being a possible number you would see of teachers leaving, that would number 41.5 teachers in Grand Ledge that we could possibly lose because we have a much larger school district. My friend has stayed in contact with Baldwin teacher friends. She also told me that Baldwin had to offer considerable money to convince teachers to teach in intersessions. Young teachers primarily work the sessions due to low starting wages, which was creating burnout. Sports on a balanced calendar has been and continues to be a challenge in Baldwin. New teachers, by state law, must take reading classes in order to recertify and keep their teaching certification. The ESD offered that class at a reduced cost, but Baldwin administration denied teachers to take the course because they were already back to school. Parapros left due to the unsteady pay that was caused by the balanced calendar. 5 of 7, so they're much smaller elementary school. They had 7 parapros in the elementary. 5 of them left at the elementary level due to the balanced calendar. Their building subleft. The ISD staff experienced changeover due to taking assignments in other districts in the county that was not on a balanced calendar. And students were not given rigorous learning opportunities at intersessions. They needed to make the sessions more fun in order to attract the students to come. So that was, as I was thinking about the balanced calendar and the talk of our community thinking about needing to think about whether we wanted to go to the balanced calendar or not, it came to my mind, well, geez, we've been talking about Baldwin and the fact that they went to the balanced calendar. It would be a good thing to get some firsthand experience and knowledge from a friend that I find to be very trustworthy and very rounded teacher. And that was the information she had to provide, and I wanted to make sure that I provided it for you as well while you make your decision on how you'd like to proceed as far as our calendar for next year and the years to come. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Melissa Mazzola, 320 North Clinton Street. First, I wanted to give a huge shout out to not only GLPS, but GLPD, and especially Jill Mangrum for the handling of the bomb threat last week. I thought it was handled very well, very quickly. Jill came on the PA system. She was very cool. She was calm. She was collected, and it set a really good tone for the building. So I just wanted to start with, I thought that was very well done, fast and efficient. So appreciated that. I also wanted to thank you guys for listening last week. It was shared with me that you guys were interested in more data on balanced calendars. I have not had a whole lot of time to do much, and actually Greg and I didn't even talk, and it sounds like we kind of focused on the same thing, so I apologize. But I'm trying to find more schools in Michigan that are on a balanced calendar, and so we can get a little bit more data from that. I did look at Baldwin schools. At the top of that sheet that has just the two glances, you can see Grand Ledge Public Schools at a glance, and the Baldwin Public or Community Schools at a glance. What I do know that Baldwin schools transferred to a balanced calendar the 14-15 school year. So you can see the before, the first year of the change, and then you can also see the change after, which I like because it's a good overview. I did want to do a quick look at enrollment and their fund balance just to see how that affected. You can see that their enrollment has dropped. The year before balanced calendar, it was 511 student or 561, and it dropped to 511 when I pulled up the individual numbers. It's only about 50 students, but with a school their size, it equates to about 9% of their population. So that would be a much larger number in our district. If that were the same in our district, I'm not sure if that would affect us the same way or not. Unfortunately, the year they changed was also the year we changed from MEP to MSTEP, so we don't have a lot of good data to compare that to. I did look at their fund balance. It did have quite a significant drop initially. I think they were at like 26% for their fund balance. I was actually surprised at how high it was. But you can see it had a big drop initially, and it has since gone up just a little bit, and they're at 11.5% now. Which is still higher than what we're at. The other piece of information I handed out to you was an email. I reached out to a friend of a friend of a friend, and that is an email she sent back. I asked for some unbiased information about that, so you can look through that. She gave pros, she gave cons, and some things they ran into. Yeah, so wanted to thank you for listening and wanting to do more research. I wish we had more time to get you more info. However, I'm hopeful that we can shift gears away from a balanced calendar and look at schools that are achieving much higher and closing the achievement gap and see what they're doing to make that happen. I don't necessarily believe that that's a balanced calendar. So I'm hopeful we can start looking in that direction. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have one quick question. Greg, will you ask your friend at Baldwin why they get $34,000 per student? I got,
No.
that's what it says
No.
on here.
No.
And that is revenues per pupil.
It's,
That's, I can't imagine that's,
that's Fantasyland.
I mean, that might be an
That's-
operating
nobody
millage,
gets
but
that.
there's,
Something,
That's
yeah,
fantasy.
that can't possibly be
something
accurate.
mixed up.
They're getting a lot
Yeah.
of money first, and then that.
Oh, okay.
No,
But the
I
next.
was gonna say, if it
next
is, we're doing,
we're going there.
we're getting
Shows.
really, we're getting the business.
Instructional. Yeah.
Yeah. I do want to say, Melissa, I've done the same thing you have. I've looked at a lot of different schools around.
I just want to have a point of order right now. We're not done with public comment, so I'd like to proceed with public comment. There might
Okay.
be more people.
Good evening. My name is Shirley Reese. Our address is 7447 West Howe Road. That's a DeWitt address, but still proud Grand Ledge Comets. My husband and I have 3 children in the Grand Ledge Public Schools, and we will have a kid in this district for the next 9 years. I'm speaking tonight again about my concern with this proposed extended calendar. I continue to be concerned about it. 2 weeks ago, a number of people spoke about our desire for you to please involve the community. I have 3 kids in 3 schools. I've heard not a peep, except for what I see on social media. The Lansing State Journal had a little article. Many of my parent friends have no clue what's going on with this. I think if this is the direction we want to go, we need our community involved and we need our community backing. I would like to highlight our teachers are not on board with this. Why aren't we listening to our teachers in the trenches? These dedicated teachers are there every day. They read the data until their eyes are crossed. They spend their lives with these kids doing what's right and what's best for our kids. I find it inconceivable that our district would even entertain a notion that our teachers don't support. We have the best teachers I've ever seen. Let's act on their knowledge. Let's get the teachers involved. If we want to move towards this, we need to get our teachers on board and come up with a plan before we jump in. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Seeing no further mad dashes to the podium, moves us along to old business, and the approval of the 2018-2019 participation in Section 105 and 105C of the Schools of Choice.
I move the Grand Ledge Public Schools Board of Education approve participating in Section 105 and 105C Schools of Choice for the 2018-19 school year as presented.
Second.
Second move. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
I'd
Aye.
like some discussion. Yeah.
Discussion?
You know, I think a lot of people, as I read all the things about schools of choice, you know, it's, we opt for the ability to choose. It's called unlimited schools of choice. That doesn't mean we open our doors to an unlimited amount of people. It just basically gives the administration the ability to pick and choose. So if we get 100 kids and they all want to go to Delta Center and Willow Ridge, they can't go there. They might be, if there's space at Wacusta, if there's space at Beagle, they can go there. But we just can't, it doesn't allow them to jam our schools with kids. But it provides the administration with flexibility. And that's what we need because, you know, it's really hard to calculate. Now, I don't know, it's always a guessing game. You know, we're projected to be down, as Nancy's going to tell us later, 33 students this year. Loss of 33 students would mean a $250,000 loss to the district financially. And I don't like to usually put the two together, but that's why you need a little flexibility in this process. And choosing to do it this way, the unlimited schools of choice, gives that flexibility. You know, I look around us and I see all these homes and, you know, I'm trying to help my son just now buy a home in Grand Ledge and it's close to impossible. Every time something goes up, it is gone, and it can be just a pit, and it's gone in no time. So I just want to make sure that everyone realizes it's not just, you know, we're just going to let the floodgates open, let anyone who wants to come in, come in. It just gives a little more flexibility to the administration. So
Kim, you're saying that the unlimited gives us the flexibility to deal with the fact that so many people are moving in? Okay, I just wanted to clarify.
Yeah.
Right. The limited, if we guarantee 5 seats in 5th grade to Delta Center for schools of choice, and then, and we do that over the summer, and then we have 10 move-ins, then we can't pull those school of choice kids out from Delta Center. We've guaranteed them that. Whereas if they're unlimited and we put them there, we can say, okay, 10 kids just moved in, your spot is now in Wacusta if you want it. So that gives us, rather than creating new classes or even redistricting before the school year starts, which we don't want to do. So we looked at, I did ask for the numbers. We're still at about 10%, which is, I don't know that we want to get a whole lot higher, but we don't want to start cutting programs either. So, and then we do have the option to deny any students with behaviors, or special education students will come with funding from their parent district. So,
Yeah, the funding has to follow.
Yes, for those special needs.
So if kids come here and their district gets $13,000 per child, but no one does in Eaton County, so just let me be clear about that, then that funding would have to follow that child.
Any further discussion, Anisha?
and I believe additional special education, if the child is special education, additional special education from that district comes with them.
Yes.
All right. All in favor then, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion carried. That finishes old business, and now we're going to move on to new business, including a presentation and approval of the 2017 Budget Amendment Resolution. While we're doing that, I'll accept the motion, and then we'll have the presentation during discussion and then vote, after, if somebody wishes to make that motion.
So I move the Grand Ledge Public Schools Board of Education approve the 2017-2018 Budget Amendment Resolution as presented.
Support.
Thank you. And now for discussion.
It worked at 3 o'clock. Okay, yay, here we go.
What this study was for adequate and funding. This is the same, two main companies. And the same ones that Massachusetts
We're getting somewhere, aren't we?
so, to get to their work.
Okay, good evening. I'd like to present the 2017-18 budget amendment to the board this evening. Just a reminder that this presentation, as well as the budget resolution, will be posted on the district website tomorrow. Okay, Kim. This is a summary of what the adopted budget that I presented to you in June, where I thought we would end. I really thought we were going to come in basically flat. We were going to have an additional $38,000 in the fund balance, which is basically just coming in flat. However, this amendment is going to show that we are going to end the fiscal year $316,000 to the negative. So we're dipping into our fund balance a little bit. We had the fund balance of 10.1% last year. It will go down to about 9.9. Okay, Kim. So what changed? Well, you know that we received $120 more per pupil this year, so our revenue should have gone up. However, and this was noted just a few minutes ago, we did have a decrease in students, which means we actually went down a little bit. Also, keep in mind that for the 18-19 school year, there is another projected decrease in students. This is the trend across the state. So it still looks like this decrease is going to continue for a few years out. We also had an increase in some of the at-risk revenue that was given to the district this year. While on the Eaton Risa side, the money that flows through from our ISD, we receive more in the way of the federal IDEA revenue. But in doing that, to hold the other districts in the county harmless, we basically lost our special education tax revenue. So that revenue went to the other districts that were no longer getting that IDEA revenue that we took on this year. So what this all says when you come down to the end is that even with that $120 per pupil increase, our net revenue increase was only $250,000. Okay, Kim. Now let's look at the expenditure side. What happened to our expenses? We gave out steps, lane changes. We have some new hires. We also had some resignations that tend to, weigh each other out. Because we ended last year in such a positive, with such a positive balance, we did issue a 2% bonus to all staff in November of 2017. That was not in my adopted budget in June. We also issued the ORS healthcare refund that we received from the court settlement in December. We issued all of those checks out to our employees, and that we'll go into the next slide, and that kind of put an additional expenditure on the books that I had not budgeted for.
But can I ask for clarification on that? I
Sure.
thought that money was taken from the state. State held it, so why was this an expenditure?
And it is, and that's what the next slide is going to kind of explain that, because, yeah, you look at that and you say, why did it cost Grand Ledge School anything when we got the money back from ORS? Why is there an additional expenditure to us? The next slide is going to kind of clarify that a little bit. Just in closing on this slide, so our net expenditure increase was $567. So we had $250,000 in the revenue, but a $567 increase in the expenditure, which leads to that 316 hit to our fund balance. Okay, Kim. So this one's kind of going to clarify that ORS refund. So yes, of that $554 million court ruling that was settled December 20th of 2017, approximately 1.4 million of that came back to Grand Ledge schools. That was refunded 100% out to employees, current employees, former employees. But what happened when we distributed those on January 31st, we got the money from ORS from the state aid payment on January 22nd, sent the money back out by January 31st. I have to say thank you to my payroll staff for turning that around so quickly, because we were probably one of the first districts in the state to get that refund out. So she did a good job. So why did this cost the district anything? When those deductions were withheld from people's paychecks, they were held on a pre-tax basis. They were not taxed by FICA, federal, or state. So when we reissued that money to employees, it becomes taxable income. It was subject to FICA. So not only did we have the employee portion of the FICA tax, we had the employer portion that had to be paid in to the federal government. That's the piece that hit the books that was not budgeted in my adopted budget. So,
No one saw that coming.
And yeah.
you know, we knew it would happen when this, when or if this money was returned to the school. I just, we really thought we'd have a little bit of time to kind of do some budgeting on that if when the courts ruled on it, it would take them a while to process this and get it back to the school. They turned that around very quickly. I mean, extremely quickly. So it's done. I like the fact that it's no longer setting out there waiting to be resolved. It's a done issue. So
How much did that?
And our liability has been paid.
How much did that end up causing the district?
That cost the district probably about $135,000 that I had to get into my budget quickly so that I could pay those checks.
Well, I appreciate the turnout that you did that in, because I know a lot of districts are holding on to that in the event. I'm like, in the event of what?
You know, and some of that was the accounting. How do we account for that? I actually sat in on some of the 1022 committee meetings. I listened in on those and heard attorneys talking, CPAs talking, MSBO officials talking, even MEA representatives talking. We were all worked together to see, how do we account for this? How do we locate employees that have left the district? What if we can't locate employees that have left the district? What do we do with employees that have passed away? What do we do with that money? So there were all kinds of questions that had to be addressed. And imagine a school like Lansing Public Schools trying to locate all of their employees. And I probably should remind people that those deductions were taken from people's checks starting in July of 2010 through August 31 of 2012. A lot of those people have left. They've retired. They've moved out of state. They, you know, a few of ours, yes, had passed away, unfortunately, you know, so trying to locate everyone, it was a task. And that's where some of these other school districts they're still trying to hunt those people down. A lot of school districts had changed software systems. We were one of them. But luckily I was able to retrieve this information from our old system fairly easily. Others didn't have the information anymore. And that's where some of the difficulty has come into play. So, you can go to the next slide. So then, on a summary on basically the budget changes is that, yes, this district will experience a $316,000 deficit or a hit to the fund balance at year end, resulting in a fund balance of 9.9%. And before we move on then to the projection, what's on the horizon, even though some of you have taken away my thunder already. Are there any questions on the actual budget numbers?
Yeah, so we lost 33 students this 2017-18, correct?
Yes.
From the year before. What did we budget for? Because I thought we budgeted for right around that. Is that
We
true?
budgeted for close to
Okay.
that. It was right in that. I think around maybe even 28, you know, so
Okay.
there was a little bit of a difference in
Okay.
there in what was budgeted and
Okay.
what was adopted and what ended up being actual.
Sure.
So, okay, now I'm going to move forward to what's on the horizon. What is coming up for 18-19? But again, proceed with caution. The governor presented his budget February 7th. And I know Denise had mentioned that there's an increase of 120 to 240 per pupil is what is in his budget. You know, Grand Ledge would be more on the $240 per pupil side. Governor's also saying that he is going to continue the categorical revenue we were receiving. It's a $25 per high school student. He wants to continue that revenue flowing to the school district.
Nancy, just for the sake, what is a categorical?
Categorical is it's an additional revenue outside of just the per pupil foundation allowance calculation. So we get some additional revenues. Our at-risk funding is a categorical revenue, an
So it's
additional.
specified funding.
Yes,
Specified.
for a specific
Yeah.
purpose, you know. Yes. So, and the governor is also saying he wants to maintain that at-risk funding that we're receiving this year too, so we would not lose that funding that we have budgeted at this point in time. Those are all good things. I'm very happy with that.
But they're on the horizon.
But there are some things that are going to be coming in the future that will be hitting the general fund, the state of Michigan's general fund. These constraints could end up affecting the school aid fund. We don't know at this point in time, but these are things we're watching, keeping an eye on. Some of them are the personal exemption increase. They're looking to see if they could do something with the personal exemption increase to offset the increase in state taxes that are as a result of the Trump tax law that just passed. So, homestead property credit is another one that's out there, that's looming out there, that could be an additional strain on the general fund. Personal property tax reform. And then there's the road funding bill that has been out there that is anticipated to increase to $600 million by 2021. So if these increases hit the general fund, what does that mean to the school aid fund? And you can go to the next slide. I was going to expand on that. Some of it could be that we get a general fund contribution to the school aid fund. So the general fund does give us money. If the general fund doesn't have money, the school aid fund will not receive their money, or it could be lowered. Also, higher education budgets. Right now, the school aid fund is paying for some of the higher education expenditures, but we're helping to them with their expenditures. That could possibly increase if the general fund can't take those expenditures on. Then here's the income tax distribution to school. And again, Denise made a comment on this, that this tax distribution to school right now, income tax is distributed to the school aid fund on a gross calculation. So how much does the state of Michigan bring in for income tax? And they figure out how much the school aid fund gets by the gross amount of that income tax. And the talk was to go to a net formula calculation. So gross taxes less the refunds, then we'll determine how much the school aid fund is going to receive from income tax. You can see that is 22% of the school aid fund revenue. And as Denise said, that's a $430 million hit to the school aid fund.
I'm going to interrupt a moment to tell everyone in attendance, and then if anybody watches this on cable, this was part of Proposal A, that it would be gross and not net. This was part of the grand bargain that was made in the mid-90s. Failure to uphold that agreement with the voters should be something that everyone contacts their elected representatives and says, if you can't keep your promises, how can we teach our kids to keep their promises? Because it's changes like this. I mean, forget about the fact that they've diverted so much, okay, you can't really, that they've diverted so much to higher education, because that's a legal argument that it's still for education purposes. And even though that was not part of the promise of Proposal A, I mean, this is very clearly flies in the face of it, not even just through fancy manipulation of words. Okay, I mean, higher education is education, but that's not what people were promised.
It's K-12.
And people were promised gross. People were promised that this money would be for K-12 education, and Grand Ledge would still be better off if we had never passed Proposal A, because we would actually, if you adjust for inflation, be having more money for our students and staff and smaller class sizes and everything everyone in this room wants. But if they do this, this will absolutely hurt us in a very fundamental way. And this is something that we can have discussions about how to educate our children, what the calendar should look like, but none of that will matter if we don't have money to keep the light on. And so this is really important, and this is something that cannot happen.
So is this something, John, is this a new formula they've devised? Or is
No, this is an argument
this argument they're using right now?
that it's not fair, because the school aid fund has continued to grow,
Yes.
despite the fact that they're diverting funds out of it for higher education. And so the argument is it's not fair to every other program that we made this deal for Proposal A. A bargain struck is a bargain that should be kept. And it's inconceivable to me that they believe that it's not fair to the other budgets that the refunds are paid out of general fund dollars. This was the agreement that we struck, and it's
Now it's being used for everything else.
yes, and well, that, and then to go back on it in this would be a very significant loss. It's not something that, well, I mean, we're dying about that by 1,000 cuts from the legislature anyway, but I'm sorry. Monopolizing the debate.
I agree. I see your frustration because, when you look at the statistics, everyone else in the whole country, their funding has gone up over the last 10 years. Michigan is the only one that's declined by almost a full percentage point over the last 10 years. So, you wonder why we've dropped down to 48, 47 in the entire United States in public education. And here we got teachers doing their job, got everyone doing their job, and we just haven't invested in education. We keep divesting by giving tax cuts to everybody. So that's my rant, and done.
Also,
I promise.
you did miss the acceleration of sales tax on the difference, which will affect the school aid fund by reducing the amount of sales tax that people pay on boats and cars.
We could probably keep going and keep going and keep going. You don't know what's around the
don't.
bend next. That's the thing. So, other things we have to keep an eye on. Of course, I gave you what the governor's proposal is for the budget. Now we have to have the legislative review of that and where it will end. No one knows at this point in time. And of course, last but not least, number of students for next year is unknown. And remember, it is still projected to decrease again. So these are all things we're just kind of keeping our eyes on as we try to start moving forward to 18, 19, and building a budget for next year.
I like it better when we can give out 2% bonuses, you know?
So do I.
Good years.
So do I. I really do. I do enjoy giving out 2% bonuses.
So the 2% we gave out was left over from the 17-16 budget, is that correct?
Yes, the 16, 17, because we ended up in a very positive
Right. So, but that-
balance, it's been the superintendent's
Yeah, it's almost a
know,
profit sharing.
idea that,
yeah.
you know, this needs to go back to the people that helped get us here.
Right. So, but being it was a one-time payment, it really doesn't have anything to do with this year's budget, is that correct?
Well, we paid it out this year. So because we didn't close the books out, you know, the auditors come in July, and we get a final draft usually sometime in August. And it's at that point in time when we look at what my adopted, or
Right.
what my actual was
Right.
that I presented in June compared to what everything, ended out once we have all of our entries booked. And then we base it on that. It's like,
Okay.
do we have revenue? Do we have additional money that we can give back to our staff? And for the second year in a row, we said, yes, we do. And that is where it deserves to go. So.
What was that amount?
What was the amount of the 2% came to about $500,000 once you put in the payment and then the fringes that are associated with it. So, yeah. And then last but not least, of course, this is an election year. I know that John has already mentioned something that it could be quite terrifying. We have a governor up for election, 11 members of the Senate, and 52 members of the House of Representatives. So we're going to have all these new people in a year who knows what agendas and what interests they're bringing with them. Plus, they have to start learning the ropes themselves. And it does put us into a lame duck session, too. So we shall see. We'll just kind of stay tuned and see what happens. Are there any other questions? Okay.
Thank you.
So now you still get me because I have another presentation for you. So you don't get rid of me that fast. Go right ahead.
Yes.
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 And now we're going to move on to our capital improvement fund, or our sinking fund. It was brought to my attention that, yes, we present to the board invoices as they come in and are payable, but we don't present something that shows what did we spend all of our funds on that we collect, the tax collection we pull in from our sinking fund levy. What do we spend it on? Can we have a summary of that just to kind of see that, you know, how quickly it goes, and what we are using this money for? So just kind of a quick little summary of the sinking fund. It is voter approved. The revenue collected, what it can be used is for the purchase of real estate, construction or renovation of existing buildings. But what it can't be used for, we cannot purchase equipment. We cannot purchase technology equipment, office classroom equipment, cannot purchase school buses, and it cannot be used for salaries. So our revenue collection is based on the voted millage rate, which was voted at 0.8 mils in 2011. So what does 0.8 mils mean? Well, on a $100,000 house taxable value, it would be $80 a year, just to kind of put that into perspective. However, this year, our millage was permanently reduced to 0.768 mils based on a Headley reduction. And what a Headley reduction is if our property values are increasing faster than the rate of inflation increases, we are subject to reduce our millage rate, and it's permanently reduced. So even if next year property values fall,
Still reduced.
it's still reduced. We cannot go back to that 0.8 mil. So I'm going to take you through the 15-16 fiscal year, the revenues and expenditures in our sinking fund, the 16-17, and then what we currently have budgeted for 17-18. So in fiscal year 16, we brought over from fiscal year 15 $1,168,000. We collected $1 million, just roughly over $1 million on our sinking fund tax levy. So we had total available revenue, when you put the two together, $2,187,000 that we could use during that fiscal year for those items I just mentioned earlier, buying a building or renovating buildings. So these are the expenditures for fiscal year 16. Just a quick little note, abated taxes. You see that and say, what's an abated tax? Abated taxes, if someone goes and goes to the board tax tribunal and asks for a reduction, a lowering of their taxable values, if those taxes have already been paid to the district, we have to pay those back to the county, and then they distribute them out to the property owners. So we had a little bit of abated taxes. You'll see a little bit every single year. Some of the other items, fencing, concrete improvements. We have sidewalks all over that have to be fixed. Flooring, some HVAC. That HVAC, we actually had water heaters that needed to be replaced at Delta Center, Wacusta, and the high school. The roofing on that year was half of the roof at Holbrook. Yes, that was half of it. So the other half is still waiting to be replaced. classroom renovations on there. We actually did some work in the drafting rooms at the high school. Community recreation remodel, so we brought community recreation in from the city, and so we had to renovate an office so that we could bring that program in. And one thing I wanted to point out, you look at these numbers, you think, okay, we get $1 million a year. $1 million a year, that's a lot of money. If you think about what you could do with your house if you had $1 million a year to renovate it, right? You know? But keep in mind that the district has 711,000 square feet, dollars, yeah, square feet of flooring. We have a comparable amount of roofing, because we have floors, we have roofs that cover that same floor. We have miles of asphalt parking lots and concrete sidewalks. And we have 11 buildings that have at least 3 boiler HVAC systems in each of them that we have to keep going. We have to keep that mechanical workings up and running. Okay, Kim? So now we're going to move on to fiscal year 17. In fiscal year 16, we did not spend everything, all the money that we had available. So we, again, carried money over to fiscal year 17. Another $1 million tax collection. So once again, $2.7 million of revenue. And this is the year that we actually purchased the Delta Mills building and began the renovation and started working on the Delta Mills Early Childhood Center. And you can see that figure is at the bottom of the screen. That was the biggest one for that year. The pool dehumidifier on there. There was a small amount on the 15-16 screen. That 7,000 on the previous screen plus the 83 here resulted in $91,000 being used to renovate the pool humidifier at the high school. Just want to let you know that the original estimate for that job was $600,000. $600,000, that's 60% of our revenue that we would have brought in that year on one item alone.
That is still pending.
Hmm?
It's gonna have to be done
It
because
still needs to be done. So this was, let's get us through. Let's add some years onto that dehumidifier at the pool. It's not, this is not a 20-year fix. This was a let's get us through on that. And I just, again, kudos to our maintenance supervisor for not accepting that $600,000 and saying, hey, this is what we have to do, and we're just going to spend $600,000. He worked, he looked, he tried to find what can we do so we can stretch those dollars out so we can use it on other items instead of just that one item.
And, you know, and that's the thing. I know you said it, you know, $1 million, $2 million seems like so much. But we're on the Board Bond Advisory Committee, and it's like we always have to choose. Can you do half a roof, or can you afford a whole roof?
Right.
Because what else is coming? Can you do all the boilers, or you can do one boiler? And so the money goes so quickly. And we haven't passed a bond in over 10 years. We're going on 11 years.
Right.
So there's a lot of stuff going on.
Particularly
in the
with the
district. It's
pool
exciting.
humidifier job, though, the reason it was so expensive was they were going to have to
Oh, yeah.
punch a hole in the wall, because the way the pool is constructed, they're going to have to punch a hole in the wall, pull the old humidifier out, and slide a new one in.
I thought it was a ceiling, the roof.
Was it cutting a hole in the roof?
I
It was
think
one or the
yeah.
other, yeah.
It was pretty big. You'd have to have a big crane
This
come
just,
in.
Sometimes it's just mind-boggling how stuff works.
Nancy, is there a standing fund balance for this, these for what we get every year? You said we had 970,000 left over from last year, or
When we get,
total funds at the end?
yeah, so 970 is what we have left. So that's the money that we had, that available revenue that we could use for any of our renovations, our
Right.
fixes that needed to be done. Now, is there a fund balance? Is that what you're asking?
Right, are we normally going all the way down every year, or are we rolling over money?
There is a fund balance. If we don't expend it all, so those monies, Kim, do you want to go back one slide, please? So that balance at the top, balance from the prior year, that was the sinking fund balance
Got it.
at year end. Those were revenues that we did not expend the previous year. Now, we could have actually taken that down a lot further if we
Yeah.
had done the second half of Holbrook's roof.
Yeah.
But we try to be
Right.
very
Yeah.
cautious, on what we spend it on, because if you start working on a roof in the summer, and now you have 12 months with this $1 million, what else could possibly happen in that 12 months that we may have an emergency situation that we don't have a choice. We have to address it like immediately. So yes, we do like to carry money forward. Sometimes it can happen, and sometimes we have to use it. So you can go on to the next one. So now we're into this year. Remember, this is the year my tax collection is down. The other years, it was about $1,085,000. This year, it's $1,056,000 because of that reduction in our millage rate for this year. So we have available revenue of $2 million this year. And these are budgeted. A lot of these have actually been expended. There's a few items on here that are still a budget item. We haven't done the work yet, but we are planning on having this work done by the end of the year. You see the end at the bottom of the Delta Mills Early Childhood Center. That is the balance of everything that we needed to do to get that building open. So those were expenditures from basically July, and then we opened that center in August. We do have the amount of money that the board approved to use on the community stadium project, the $200,000 that was approved by the board, and so that went into the turf there at the stadium project. The other thing I want to point out on here is that HVAC mechanical amount, that $271,000 that's up there. This is for some units that are on the roof, HVAC units that are on the roof at Wacusta Elementary. They have 8 units. Every one of them needs to be replaced. The price on each unit is $135,000 a piece. That's a lot of money when you think $135,000 each for 8 units. Once again, our maintenance supervisor actually brought us a proposal earlier this month where we are looking at replacing 5 units for $271,000. He found a way to make this work because of that open air classroom is what I call it there at Wacusta, without the walls, that we think for that price, which would be the price of 2 of those HVAC units, we could actually replace 5 of them. Now, the other 3 still are probably gonna cost us $135,000 apiece. But if we can get the heat regulated on 5 of those units for that amount of that amount of money, I think that he does a great job at trying to find alternate solutions and spread that money.
So we're getting 5 new units for that price?
That's the proposal that is currently in front of the bond advisory committee at this point in time. I think probably in a couple of weeks, I think we'll hear more about where he is on that project, so.
Right. How is that?
It's because there aren't the walls. Because, so the other ones are for the offices that are closed in, that
Right.
are walled in,
Right.
and you have to have a separate unit for each one of those classrooms or rooms.
Right.
But because Wacusta happens to be that open air and they don't have the walls, he thinks that he could replace 5 of those units and just kind of have a climate controlled in that open air space. So that's what we're looking at.
They would all be connected, those 4 would be connected instead of separate units.
Okay.
So, but that's, I mean, if this works, if this is what we can do, rather than buying 2 units. So we're either gonna buy 2 units or we're gonna do the 5 units. So, we would much rather be able to get the 5 units and reduce our spending if possible, and yet do what we need to do is to get the heat regulated there at Wacusta. So.
Yeah, I don't know that, I think the problem is that it's not precise, so. That would
It's very
right.
imprecise.
Right. Okay.
So, and that basically at the end, that's going to leave us with about 411,000 in the sinking fund at year end is where we're at. And we don't like to get too low, again, because, it's February. We have a few months to go, and who knows what could happen. So,
This building only has 1 unit.
Hmm?
This building, Sodden building only has 1 unit.
right. And actually,
Might be the key word.
I don't know for sure, but I can tell you that after last week with all the rain, we need something done with our roof. Because we had water all over the place. So, I mean, but there are things like that come up that you don't know what's going to happen until you come into work and the floor's wet all over the place. So, yeah. Are there any questions, or you've learned everything about the sinking fund that you ever want to know?
I have a question. Didn't the legislature recently pass something that opens up the sinking fund? But it would require us to renew the sinking fund before we could take advantage of it?
It's time.
Is it technology and
For the
security?
technology.
Yeah.
So they added the technology equipment into the sinking fund, but it
But
doesn't.
we have to renew.
We
ours
have to
before we
renew
can take
before
advantage of the
that can
changes.
happen. So we have to go out to 2021 before that could be added to our,
And now that we're stuck, because I remember we passed the 1 mil sinking fund. And now it's reduced because our property taxes, our values are escalating.
we actually, so we had a 1 mil sinking fund when
Yeah.
the first time around 2001,
Yeah, then we renewed it.
and we renewed it at .8. That's what we took out to the voters, was to reduce it from a 1 mil to a .8, which then now with this Headley reduction means it will go down. So if next year, if the property value increases faster than inflation, we could even go down even further in that levy.
So Nancy, in 2021, then could we go out for another 0.8 or 1 mil? on the sinking fund?
You can go out for, yeah, you could go out for a 1 mil.
Okay. What's the maximum you can go out to?
I,
5
no,
mils? I think it is.
5 mils? I thought that one of the, I think one of the school districts has 7,
Yeah.
so.
No, I would never ask.
Right.
No, I would never ask. But I know some schools have gotten 5 mils, which I find incredible. Buying buses, I mean. Buses, I mean,
Okay,
thank you.
thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Nancy.
Listen,
I just, there's something that I wasn't sure about. So the sinking fund from 2011, correct, was when our last sinking fund millage was voted. Now, so listening, it sounded like that expires in 2021?
2021, it's a 10-year, so.
10-year, okay.
So the 2 levies we've gone out, the voter-approved proposals that have passed, in 2001, we passed a 10-year sinking fund. That was a 1 mil. And then when it came up for renewal, we went to a .8 mils for our sinking fund, and then that expires in 2021.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Oh, good. Comments from staff? Oops, I'm sorry.
I just had a curiosity, the lighting portion of the budget in 16 was 8,000, 17 was 52,000, 18 was 125,000. Seems like a, oh, I'm sorry, Erica Ledesma, 732 Lincoln Court, Lansing. So it just seems like a big increase throughout the years for lighting. Just curious of what that increase
That's
was.
like a general category, because some of it's been conversion to LED lighting. You know, it's been lighting in different segments of the building. We just did a lot of lighting changes for the softball field. So I mean, it's been different numbers because we've been doing different projects.
Okay. Thank you.
Didn't we spend a lot on the high school, switching it over to
To
LED?
LEDs. Yeah, that was a really.
And that was
Energy
probably,
efficiency.
yeah, that was probably the 100,000, or a big part of it.
I have a question. You want me to still state my name and, okay, Tamara Lipsy, 907 DeGraff Street. What was the name of the bill that you told us, the number for the bill that you said we should look into?
The income tax fix?
Yeah.
I don't have a number on that, I'm sorry. That's
Okay.
what it was referred to in the material that I looked at.
Income tax?
The income tax fix for the school aid fund.
Thanks.
All right. Future topics. There will be a board bond advisory
Do
meeting.
we have any comment?
Oh, I'm sorry, comments in from staff and board.
Yeah. You know, I'd like to make some comments. You know, you can't, Union Representative Greg Alma, you came with some information and about comparisons to Baldwin schools. And you keep saying, make this part of you need to research this to make your decision. But the thing is, we don't make that decision. This is negotiated between your union representatives and our representatives. And part of that negotiation team is not this board, okay? It is the superintendent and his team, and they bring that to us. We don't even vote on the calendar. So, you know, to say we need to consider all this is something that needs to be brought together by the two sides. And I think, John, you referred to that because we've gotten a lot of emails as a board about the balanced calendar, but it's really not something we discuss. The reason we're doing it, and we've talked about this, because the board talks about kids. And we have 1,600 kids that are failing in our district. We have 45% proficient in reading and math. Next year, the new law will go into effect, that if our third graders are not proficient in reading, they are required to be held back by law. And that is something I think everyone in education as well as we're concerned about. You know how devastating that it would be for a third grader, no less, when they're really starting to become who they're going to be and, you know, take a lot of pride in themselves. So I'm not, you know, I'm not concerned myself about a balanced calendar. What I'm concerned about are these kids. And we have to come together to find a way to address this 30% of our students that are failing. And I know our graduation rate may say, you know, on paper it's 94%, but I assure you, with 30% of kids failing and we are failing them, I would assume that number's a lot worse. Because what about the kids that dropped out because what happened to them? What happens to all these kids that we don't address those needs? And, you know, several years ago, the district came forward with not a balanced calendar, but the trimesters. And the reason for that, the state upped all the requirements that student subject matter they had to take. And the only way the administration could figure out on how to help our music students, our high-performing students, was to go to a trimester system. And I know all these changes sometimes take adjustments because they're not part of our traditional schedule. But what's happened, what that's given our district the ability to do is we more than doubled our AP course offerings. Steve, correct me if I'm wrong on that. And the other part of it is our music students, they can take band all 4 years. They can take a lot of music for several years. So, I mean, those are the good things that came from that, but now it's to address that low-performing section of our students. So that's why I want you to consider, I mean, the calendar is negotiated. And the board has no input really into that. You know, we could talk about it, you know, to the superintendent, other board members, what do you think? But really, we don't have much of a say in it, you know, so I just want everyone to be aware of that. Steve, is there anything I'm missing on anything I'm missing on this lower performing piece? That's the thing that I struggle with. I mean, why we're pursuing this and what other suggestions that may be available.
This is generally just for comments. I mean, if we want to add it to the discussion for the March 12th to revisit the balanced calendar, we can.
Okay, all right.
I'd like to add on to that. While it's true that the calendar is ultimately.
These are your comments?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Going back earlier in the session, the calendar is ultimately negotiated. I believe it is the board's job to set the parameters that are negotiated. I do want you guys to know that we are working towards some sort of consensus in this. And Melissa, I wanted to tell you, I have reached out to the only district that I can really relate Grand Ledge to in Michigan that has a balanced calendar would be Davison. They're about the same size, very close socioeconomic. I've reached out to their board. I'm waiting to hear back. I've called an elementary principal in Lake Orion who their elementary was a balanced calendar for 10 years and they recently went away from it. So I called to find out why. I'm waiting to hear back from him. I don't know that I believe that we have no bearing on this. While it is a negotiated item, we want what's best for the district, for the community, and so we will work together to set those parameters as a board. And, you know, those 30% we say are failing, it means that they are not proficient in one or more category. So I had a question myself, what does failing mean? It means they're not proficient in one or more category. So while we as a district, as a board, as everyone need to find a solution to work towards helping those 30%, there is more work being done behind the scenes to assure that everyone's on the same page with this. But I don't believe is out of our hands.
I'd like to thank everybody for coming. This is still a nice turnout. I would like to also thank both the GLPS, GLPD, and Principal Mangrum for handling the bomb threat. I felt like there was enough communication. It went out very quickly over social media. It was updated well. Kim, thank you for handling that. One of the things that the community has asked for is more transparency. I think that helps. The hard part, though, is I did get one email. The board got one email where a parent was upset that all they got was an all clear and they wanted to know more what happened. So I think we might try to explain what we do a little bit more next time. I'd really like it if there wasn't a next time. Also, let the meeting get a little off the rails this evening. I apologize for that. I have a tendency to digress and obfuscate, and I will endeavor in the 10 months remaining in my term to really keep us focused, because that is what is expected from me. That being said, is there any other comments from board and staff?
I have something, John, on a completely different note, but still having to do with finance. I attended a conference on Friday, and the afternoon of that conference was talking about funding Michigan schools. What's an adequate dollar amount to fund our schools? And there's been a lot of work that's been put into that. There's a school finance research collaborative that has come out of that. If you would like more information, I would encourage you to visit Fund MI Schools, so fundmichiganschools.org, to get more information. But they are suggesting that a base cost of a per pupil funding should be around $9,500. And that was also one of the groups that they used to as part of the collaborative, were the group that Massachusetts and Tennessee used when they came up with their new figures and new funding. But this won't happen without a lot of input from individuals who are interested in adequately funding education in the state of Michigan. So I will, one of my goals is to try to get more of this information out, and I will be trying to do that in the future. But you may go to fundmichiganschools.org if you would like more information.
And I'm assuming by interested individuals, you mean everyone in this room and everyone that we know?
Everyone in the state of Michigan.
Badgering the people who have the ability to make these changes?
Yes.
And live up to the requirements of Article 8 of our state constitution?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. Comments from staff and board are finished. Future topics. There's a board bond advisory meeting Monday, March 12th, 2018 at 5:30 p.m. in Sodden Room 107. A work session on the same day immediately following in the Sodden Administrative Conference Room. And a regular meeting Monday, March 26th at 6 p.m. in this very space. With that being said, it's 7:24 and we're adjourned.
Thank you.